extended reality, so both virtual and augmented, and roboticization. Okay, robots are obviously slightly connected to artificial intelligence, but we're going to take it as a slightly different trend. So, we have here Felipe, who runs a company revolving around collective artificial intelligence. Fernando, who's from a container logistics marketplace company. Gregorio has a sustainable mobility gamification SaaS solution for companies, animals, universities, etc., etc. And Enrique works at last mile on-demand logistics company with 3 countries, 57 different cities around Spain, Portugal, and Italy. So, Felipe, as we're going to start with artificial intelligence, just talk us through. You wanted to talk a little bit, as I understand it, about augmented intelligence and how it's evolving into artificial intelligence, and how collective intelligence and artificial intelligence work together, right?
That's right. Yes, we have an amazing technology that merged, as told artificial intelligence and a very disruptive collective intelligence algorithm. This is running more than 50 machines on Amazon. And how many decisions, daily decisions, do you take? How many? Do you know? 35,000 daily decisions. And most of these decisions are friends, colleagues, or roommates involved in your decisions. This is not enough to have declared or such kind of artificial intelligence. You don't need any other that merge or influence of every people that is involved in your life. And this is why our technicians have very high percentage of exit in the final decision. We have a very high probability to be successful in our recommendation. For instance, we have
give a specific example.
We have a TV recommender for series, for movies, and we have another solution for find the right job for the right people in the right team. No? For instance, it's very busy also in cash flow in the companies. No? We have several ways to deploy the algorithm and the technology in order to solve the problem of the people.
Regarding mobility, they have one that also finds the cheapest petrol price for a specific route. But Fernando, you know, we see a lot of information pilots being run for trucks that are driving across the US specifically, taking either, I think it was Heineken, but I saw another simple AI the other day that's also taking a truck across the US. Talk to us a little bit about how Transeo is making use of artificial intelligence, or intends to make use of artificial intelligence.
Well, Transeo is a marketplace which the demands of freight sending and the transportation companies. So we try to push the industry to manage so much data that are generated on those operations. And it's crucial to incorporate this technology to know better when to send some freight and which route is going to be better because it's going to be cheaper. That's the part of the people sending the freight, but for the other part, how to make more profitable the assets to the transportation companies. Mainly the road one. Could be also multimodal, but the road one, which is the 90% of the freight goes by road. So we use that to find the best way and the cheapest way to send it and more profitable for the company.
By keeping the trucks moving.
Yeah, exactly, and always full loaded and the best roads, because we have to incorporate many data like the weather, like the diversion in roads or some strikes or any kind of problem. We try to put all the data together and help drivers, companies, and so on to manage this thing.
And Gregorio, in terms of sustainable mobility, how are you using AI at the moment? Where do you see it going?
I think that using artificial intelligence is essential now to get the most from the huge amount of data that we are getting now. We are now experiencing an incredible increase in new data sources. And for example, what we do is we are getting data from users of our app. We reward people for using our app to register the sustainable trips around the city. So we are getting new information about mobility patterns, and city planners can use now that information to improve the infrastructure and services related to promotion of sustainable mobility. So we have now the possibility to transform mobility data into improvement of infrastructure services. So we are increasing the speed of that change, switching to more sustainable means of transport.
And are you doing some kind of predictive analysis of how an improvement, like placing different bicycle drop-off points in specific places, how that will improve traffic flows, for example?
For example, new companies are arriving to the cities and to, for example, bike-sharing companies or electric scooters. And we are getting data about, for example, in Barcelona, how people are using electric scooters around the city. Providing that information to the city planners, they will be able to locate the stations and to give information to those companies about the amount of users and the amount of electric scooters they are going to need and where. That's essential to avoid conflicts that we have been suffering in several cities.
And Enrique, talk us through how you're making use of artificial intelligence.
So I'd like to rescue some of the words my peer said here. The first one is data. You said something about data. It's one of the main issues here, and the other one is decision making. You talk about decision making. So why do we want AI in our companies in order to not to decide, which is a very comfortable way of doing business. And when it comes to our business, we supply things, we deliver things. Our business is very easy to explain, we deliver things. And the main issue with our market is that things have to be delivered. And people deliver things, so individuals deliver things. The main thing we're working now is how to increase the profitability per courier. Couriers deliver things, they deliver a certain amount of things per hour, and what we want to do is to understand the market, to know, to predict, as you said before, to predict what is possible, what is going to happen, and to have sufficient couriers in the street in order to deliver all of the demand we have. Also, the main problem we face, not just us, but all of the companies in the market, is that the elasticity of the demand versus the supply is very difficult to adapt, because the human capital cannot be adapted as having more machines doing things. You have to deliver, you have to have more individuals in the street. So the improvement of the AI will improve the profitability of the couriers we have in the street.
And this is predictive analysis of routes or of timing?
We have both of them. So first thing here to mention is that our company has been having data for 1 year and a half. This is not enough. We need the machine to learn more, to keep improving the inner technology, the back end of the product. And the main goal now is focused on how many people do we need in the street for the demand we have. The consequence of that will bring more data to analyze, and that will bring the good adaptation in order to maybe pick up 3 different things at the same time, deliver in the same places. That's one of our main goals.
Just before we jump on to blockchain, I just want to ask a question. So for me, one of the huge game changers in terms of mobility, focusing specifically on artificial intelligence, is the brief presentation that Elon Musk gave about 2-3 weeks ago now, where he talked about taking their entire, doing a software update to their entire fleet of Teslas around the world, and automatically offering them the potential to not only be fully autonomous, like the legislation allows, but also to include them within a car sharing system. So theoretically, the car would be free, the energy is relatively cheap, if not free at the moment. And if at the same time they're fully autonomous, that would be like a huge game changer. Right? We talk about, okay, you see that horses in New York and how it took 10, 13 years or whatever to get all the horses. That could change things in a year. If you've got a car that's free, if you've got energy that's free, and if you can even make money off the car, well, those that buy them, they make money, and those that don't buy them, they'll extremely cheap. But all of this sounds, like fantasy, like living on Mars, right? But how soon do you see this kind of automated vehicle happening from what you're saying? So in your instance, trucks, in your instance, any kind of urban mobility, in your instance, delivery robots. How do you see this? How long do you think it will be until we actually see this in the street on a daily basis?
I think that automatic vehicles are evolving quickly, but I think that we will see them first of all as public transport, public buses that are covering secure and normal routes, short routes before, but those are already arriving. I think already in one.
I think there was a pilot in that, wasn't there? In the PTA, I think they've done a pilot.
Yeah. But the great challenge is going from that to other routes, because then the risk of having accidents is really a huge difference of complexity and a lot of necessary data and the necessary technology to avoid every risk. But we will be there for sure.
And I guess trucks is a sinister because it's outside of city centres as a general rule. It's easier from a legislative focus to make those vehicles autonomous because they're not putting at risk as a general rule so many pedestrians.
Yeah, for mid-distance in 2030 it's expected to have at least 10% of the routes covered by autonomous vehicles. One of the problems, as we said, the accident. So the security, the safety is too important because they are full of load, and depending on the load can be quite risky. And also for this reason, some routes can be covered by autonomous vehicles, and the industry is pushing because there is a lack of drivers. That's a reality. We need in Europe around 100,000 drivers to drive the trucks. In the United States, it's one of the main reasons is pushing the industry to move forward, and the authorities to authorize those trucks to be used in roads. So, yeah.
And delivery robots. So we've seen the Just Eat food delivery robots in their pilots in the UK.
And the thing is, here in this part of Europe, the main problem when you innovate is that the legislation is not done. And as it is not done, it's illegal. So we find this problem with our peer colleagues from the electric scooters. So they have big ideas, they have big solutions, but they cannot provide them everyone they want to because it's not big yet. So when it comes to delivering things with robots, we in our hub, and some of you may know, we have Heliport, which is a company that delivers things, but inside closed places. The main problem here is that if we let the machine do the work, if we let cars automatically deliver people, this is a big change in paradigm. You talk about security, and the main consequence about that is roads must be adapted to the possibility that the cars do not stop because they go somewhere. So when it comes to thinking we are in Mars, we said we are in Mars, we said 2030, I think it's probably even closer. But the main problem here is, are we we adapted to adapt to this technology? So our mind is ready, but is our personality ready? What is the price of doing that? What is the price you have to pay to let somebody go from Madrid to Barcelona with an automated car? What happened to the tolls? Will he stop? Will he not stop? This is the big challenge.
That's the reason for using just big distance, because they have the industry have a lot to learn and adapt the infrastructure, and who's going to pay this infrastructure?
All right, we'll jump on the blockchain. Now, whenever I talk about blockchain, there's always a number of people that don't quite understand what it is. So I'll just describe very much layman's terms. Blockchain isn't really more, at a very basic level, than a distributed database that's incorruptible. Right? Because it's distributed, it can't be modified. It's like a Lego tower, where every time you put a block on top of a previous one, you can't change the block that's below, right? So unless you can change history, you can't change what's in blockchain. So obviously
for us it's very important the combination between artificial intelligence and blockchain, but blockchain is not enough because we use in order to certify the reasoning of our engine, but we prove that it's only to send to others, but when you ask to other engines and the request, blockchain is not enough. We are looking for some new techniques about hash tree and some new trends that could be very better when you need a dialogue between two machines. This is something that we are involved.
that's actually quite an interesting point, right? And it takes you back to the artificial intelligence one, because one of the issues that currently exists is, what does an algorithm actually do? Who's checking what an algorithm does? You know, if an algorithm gets changed and it gives you a result that wasn't what you were expecting, who's certifying that it hasn't been modified? You know, if we're talking about autonomous vehicles that are making a decision between hitting a pedestrian or going into a tree, and somebody manages to modify that algorithm, train it to hit the person, right? Like they did with the Mexicans, where, wasn't it Microsoft that launched a chatbot that used artificial intelligence, and a load of people taught it to say, whenever somebody said Mexican, they said thief or something, I can't remember. It was something, just because when they launched the algorithm, people automatically, manually were saying, Mexicans are thieves, Mexicans are thieves, Mexicans are thieves. And the algorithm learning on it said, whenever somebody said Mexican, it was Mexicans are thieves, because it was learning off the data that was being given. So there's a good issue in terms of, okay, we do need to have some kind of incorruptible register of what's happening with these algorithms.
This is one of the reasons, because I am a runner of artificial intelligence on 80s, and for this time, nobody believes in some artificial intelligence that doesn't explain itself. No? This is one of the reasons, because neural network is not enough also, because there is for something that doesn't need explanation. But when you try to explain to some CEO of a company what is involved there, the decision of your company, and you have no explanation about, very difficult.
So just carrying on with going back to the blockchain thing. So there are loads of things that happen with blockchain in terms of transport. We have everything from the industry of container shipping, for example, on bigger ships. The documentation part of that business is actually larger than the physical container side of the business, right? So there's a number of people working in terms of traceability. Blockchain works very well where there's a lack of trust. So somebody in a port in Rotterdam doesn't necessarily believe what the customs authorities said in Lagos, and then maybe the containers also gone through Algeciras, etc., etc. So there's lots of work being done on traceability. There are two companies in the connected mobility hub that work on that. There's Chengo Tech and Ahilia. Then Ahilia also have a solution for car sharing and carpooling, where they automatically register if how many people are in the car. using the geo-positioning of the mobile phones. Then we've got some that are working with mobility as a service, so a unique payment to travel across a city with any particular ticket type. So you pay once using your phone, and then depending on what type of transport you've taken, it then distributes the money out automatically for people. So it doesn't matter if you're picking up a scooter, if you're taking a car sharing, if you're using a train, if you're using a bus. And there's two of them. There's IOMOD that's doing something similar, not quite that, but something similar, and Move app as well. You guys, Gregorio, I know we've spoken in the past about CO2 savings and how that needs to be registered so that people can prove that they've actually saved a certain amount of CO2 and that they can do using your system, but there has to be some kind of register that people can't corrupt. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that, as you have said, blockchain is a huge opportunity because combined with artificial intelligence, we have the capacity to analyze data, process data, and also register every behavior related to mobility, which is essential. For example, we are now making our users to choose the means of transport they are using, and we give them points depending on which means of transport, but they have to change using the app. So in not much time, we will be able to provide a better service, better user experience when it comes to artificial intelligence and blockchain. So the users will have to choose the means of transport, and then we will gain also credibility, calculating CO2 reduction, CO2 emission reduction for companies, because now companies will be sure about the means of transport their employees are using and the amount of kilometers they are doing using each transport.
Well, you know, to a certain extent, they can turn that into competitive advantage, right? So right now, I know that you're working with Decathlon, but I guess I know that because we met at an airport on the way to last night. But I guess nobody here actually knows that Decathlon has a sustainable mobility platform, yours, that they're using to promote sustainable mobility to reach their work. But if they did know it, if they did know how much CO2 was being saved, how many people are actually doing this compared to taking a car where there's an average of 1.1, 1.2 people per car travelling, then that could actually be a competitive advantage. If you actually put it on their website, you can see a ticket counter that goes, today we saved X number of tons of CO2, which is equivalent to planting I don't know how many trees. And they can turn that into a competitive advantage if they were able to make that information public in real time in a fashion that nobody would be able to say this about, right? Which is where blockchain fits.
Yeah.
And Rick, I know you've been using it to automatically calculate the amount that you charge any providers according to the SLAs that you have with them, which are ever more complex. So can you just talk us through that very, very briefly?
What we do is that the beautiful thing about blockchain, in relation to the question, is that there is an ethic part about it. I think it's a very ethic thing to know where do things come from. There is something particularly attractive, I believe. What we do with our suppliers, our customers, in short, is that we know exactly the full price of the thing we are delivering. We are able to understand where the cost will come from. So we really understand the contribution margin we get for every single order, and the use of that is to improve our efficiency and our financials. But I would like to highlight blockchain when it comes to food delivery. So I came here to talk about food delivery, but I just talked about delivery. So we're going to talk about food. And when it comes to blockchain, I think it's a very nice opportunity to people to really understand what they're eating, what do they have on the table. Because nowadays it's very popular to ethically eat things. Like, I want to know where this egg come from, where this leche is from. So with this blockchain, you have this added value to the food, to And I think it's a very good opportunity for many companies just to show transparency. Not as a matter of goodwill, like saying, hey, we are very nice, we're transparent, but as a matter of why is this decision? Because in the future they're not going to have so many problems with the government and local policies when it comes to transparency. I think it's a very good opportunity that many people should take now, just for the future.
That brings me to a point where you're using containers, right? So you can register where a container's been, what it includes. I guess Mexican drug smugglers won't be very happy because they can't say, oh, I've never seen this container in my life, somebody else put it in there.
Yes.
So how are you looking at using this?
As Rick said before, some of the clients, or a big part of the market, just is interested on the things have to be delivered. That's all. They don't care about the system of track and trace. We try to improve this track and trace for some part of the industry, deep freeze, and also for really valuable freight. So when the price, you mentioned mobile phones or things that are really expensive. So if we incorporate this technology, help us to improve the actual track and trace and take it to the next level. We have to move step by step because nobody's going to pay for that. Yes, Maersk is working with IBM and using Watson in trying to implement this kind of projects, but they are giants in the industry.
But there are, I'm going to do a slight Brexit thing in a second, but there are some real values to adding blockchain to traceability and to actually what's contained as a cargo or whatever. I know that Societe Generale, for example, did a pilot program with oil tankers. And oil tankers, the oil on the tanker tends to get sold, I think it's an average of 9 times, whilst it's at sea from when it leaves, let's say Saudi Arabia, to when it lands in Japan. And before blockchain, to do that meant, notary was at the port of origin, signed off as this man's crew of this quality, blah, 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 and then the boat sets out. And then one assumes that nothing happens to the cargo on the traffic, right? So you can see this open sea. But every time the oil was sold, the other parties had to see physical paperwork, documentation, to know what they were buying. And they it took like 3 days to do that. They then launched a pilot on blockchain and reduced the whole time down to half an hour. So there are some huge optimizations.
Yes, I think that's why I mentioned the benefit of the goods, the value of the freight. Because, for example, in pharma, it's being incorporated since 2015, something like that, because of the value. Because they have to control the whole processes in order to control and to make proof more than just one paper signed by people.
Right, it's just fantastic. So just being British, I just want to make a very, very quick comment about blockchain. And they talk about the backstop, right? So the Northern Irish, Southern Irish border. And they talk about what technologies could allow there to be a frictionless border. Well, if you have a container, for example, which is most of the things that are being moved across that sea, so across the Irish Sea, if you had a trusted solution where somebody was saying, okay, these are the containers, these are the items in a container, you then have sensors around the container so it can't be opened. You can see where it's being moved, you can see if it's being swapped. In theory, you could then have a frictionless border. So it's not maybe like autonomous vehicles. There's a real case that's successful waiting to happen. I mean, the whole reason they can't agree on Brexit is because of this whole frictionless border in Ireland. Let's hope that it never happens. But if it were to happen, that would be a potential solution. It's like going to the airport and wrapping your suitcase. You know that's because they can re-wrap it, right? But you know that nobody's tampered with your suitcase. Well, exactly the same thing. Or with medical equipment, if it's gone over a certain temperature and the medicine is not working again. So, and then obviously you can add in bombs and missiles and loads of things that need to be transported, that need to be tracked really quite well. So anyway, thank you very much, guys. I hope it's been interesting.